Let me put this as simply as I can. Britain will never be part of a European superstate. We've also put power back in the hands of Westminster and other national parliaments. A new red card will mean the UK Parliament can work with others to block unwanted legislation from Brussels. And at long last, we have an agreement that wherever possible, powers should be returned to member states. And we have a new mechanism to make this a reality. Every year, the EU now has to go through the powers they exercise and work out which are no longer needed and should be returned to nation states. In recent years, we've also seen attempts to bypass our opt-out on justice and home affairs by bringing forward legislation under a different label. For example, attempts to interfere with the way the UK authorities handle fraud, but brought under the guise of legislation under the EU budget. With today's new agreement, we've made sure this can never happen again. Likewise, we've established once and for all, in international law, that Britain's national security is the sole responsibility of the British government. So, for instance, we can never be part of a European army. These are significant reforms, but I've always said that if we needed to go further to put Britain's sovereignty beyond doubt, then we would. So, in addition to these changes, I will shortly be bringing forward further proposals that we can take as a country, unilaterally, to strengthen the sovereignty of Britain's great institutions. The reforms that we've secured today have been agreed by all 28 leaders, and I thank them for their patience, for their goodwill, for their assistance, for all the work that we've done, not just in the last 48 hours, but in all the months since the election last year. The changes that we've agreed will be legally binding in international law and will be deposited at the United Nations. They cannot be unpicked without the unanimous agreement of every EU country, and that includes Britain. So when I said I wanted reforms that are legally binding and irreversible, that is what I've got. And the Council was also clear that the treaties will be changed in two important respects. First, to incorporate the new principles for managing the relationship between countries inside and outside the Eurozone, and second, to carve the UK out of ever closer union. I believe the changes that we've secured as a country fulfill the objectives I set out in our manifesto at the last election. And I think they do create a more flexible Europe, more of a live and let live arrangement that recognises that one size does not fit all. But of course, there's still more to do. And I'm the first to say that there are still many ways in which this organisation needs to improve. The task of reforming Europe does not end with today's agreement. Far from it. This is a milestone on a journey, not the end point. And let's be clear, there's absolutely nothing in this agreement that stops further reform taking place. For as long as we stay in the European Union, Britain will be in there, driving forward the single market, bearing down on regulation, championing the cause of free trade, and helping to ensure that Europe remains open to the world and robust, for instance, in the face of Russian aggression. But with this new agreement, I believe the time has come for me to fulfil the promise I made when I stood for a second term as Prime Minister. So tomorrow I will present this agreement to Cabinet, and on Monday I will make a statement to Parliament and commence the process set out under our EU Referendum Act to hold a referendum on Britain's membership of the European Union. The British people must now decide whether to stay in this reformed European Union or to leave. This will be a once-in-a-generation moment to shape the destiny of our country. Now, there will be many passionate arguments made over the months ahead, and this will not be a debate along party political lines. There'll be people in my party and in other parties arguing on both sides of the debate. And that is entirely right. This is an historic moment for Britain, and people must be free to reach their own conclusion. And in the end, this will not be a decision for politicians. It will be a decision for the British people. And we'll need to look at all the facts and to ask searching questions of what either choice would really mean. Simply being in Europe doesn't solve our economic problems, far from it. And I've always been clear about that, just as I've always opposed Britain joining the euro. But turning our back on the EU is no solution at all. And we should be suspicious of those who claim that leaving Europe is some automatic fast track to a land of milk and honey. We all need to step back and consider carefully what is best for Britain, what is best for our future. Whatever the British public decide, I will make work to the best of my abilities. But let me tell you what I believe. I do not love Brussels. I love Britain. And my job, the job of the British Prime Minister, is doing all in my power to protect Britain's interests. So when it comes to Europe, mine is a hard-headed assessment of what is in our national interest. We should never forget why this organisation came into being. 70 years ago, our countries were fighting each other. Today, we are talking. Today, we are trying to fix problems. Today, we discuss round a table how we're going to sort things out. And we should never forget that. We should never take that cardinal achievement, peace and stability on the continent, for granted. Today, our world is again an uncertain place, with threats to our security and our existence coming from multiple quarters. This, in my view, is a time to stick together, a time for strength in numbers. Like many, I've had my doubts about the European Union as an organisation. Believe me, I still do. But just because an organisation is frustrating, it does not mean you should necessarily walk out of it, and certainly not without thinking very carefully about the consequences. The question that matters for me as Prime Minister is what is best for my country. How, as a country, are we stronger, safer, better off? This is something I've given a huge amount of thought. And now we have this agreement. I do believe that the answers lie inside a reformed European Union. And let me explain why. First, Britain will be stronger remaining in a reformed Europe than we would be out on our own, because we can play a leading role in one of the world's largest organisations from within, helping us determine our future. Yes, there are frustrations, and no, we don't always get our way. But time and again, British leadership at the top table gets things done, whether it's imposing sanctions on Russia or Iran, or tackling people smuggling in the Mediterranean. Because the truth is this: throughout our history, our strength as a nation has come from looking beyond our shores and reaching out to the world. And today, the EU, like NATO, like the UN, is a vital tool for Britain that we can use to boost our nation's power in the world and multiply our ability to advance Britain's interests, to protect our people, to sell our goods, to generate jobs, to raise our people's standard of living. That is one of the reasons why our closest friends outside Europe, from Australia to New Zealand, the United States and Canada, they all want us to stay inside the EU, and we should listen to them. People who want us to leave would take us out of this position of influence, and they can't tell you what that would mean for Britain's ability to advance our interests.